Hello there YouTube, and welcome to my video blog reviewing the Malaysian Grand Prix. Lots to talk about, as I have with my handy little notebook here. So the end result, not really too much of a surprise if I'm honest, but it's how it got there that is interesting, and I will talk in depth about the result, especially concerning the top four, a bit later, but obviously I want to talk about the key points of the race in my opinion, which were obviously the start, where Alonso got a really good start. He got off better than Massa and Vettel to a certain degree. He took the outside of the first corner before trying to hang back to the inside of the second, which is a tactic which, as shown in the coverage, has worked for multiple other drivers before, including Alonso, but this year it wasn't meant to be, and he got a little bit clumsy on the brakes, which probably wasn't helped due to the wet conditions that they had at the start. Obviously it rained about half an hour before the start, which soaked the track, but only really in one sector, which is what made it quite interesting. So yeah, he obviously went into the back of Vettel and damaged his front wing slightly. Well, I say slightly. One part of it was completely dragging on the floor, which caused some spectacular footage, mind. But eventually it was inevitable that it was going to fly off, and sadly it did, and he ended up in the grass, which was a great shame because he really could have made something of this race today, I think. From what I saw in practice, he looked quite good. One of the other surprises was Raikkonen. Yeah, what happened to him today? He just seemed to have a new racing line through that corner, because he was off there about 3 or 4 times, and he did exactly the same thing. So yeah, the race kind of settled down a bit. Obviously, and for the first few laps, it was a little bit chaotic, what with the weather, but it wasn't as bad as I have seen it, and the track soon started to dry, and they were eventually all in for slicks. Now, one particular driver that impressed me, and this situation could have been quite awkward, was Hulkenberg. Today, he really impressed me with he sived his way up through the field, and I have to say, the fact that he passed Perez not once but twice today, that must be quite awkward for the Mexican in the McLaren there, because obviously Sauber being his previous team. So yeah, he must have just been thinking, why did I leave? Why am I driving this shitty shell of a car? But yeah, Hulkenberg definitely impressing today. Force India as well. Both of their drivers looking pretty good. Obviously Sutil had his problems, and I don't know if he just got a bad start or something, but he wasn't really anywhere to be seen. And today, this really was Di Resta's day to shine, and I'm really gutted for both the Force India drivers for the troubles they encountered in the pits. That's really not what they deserved at all. They were both having quite a good race. So Maldonado also, he had multiple incidents in the race before eventually his race coming to a halt. Massa tried a greedy little two-stopper which didn't work, but he still ended up finishing relatively well, though it probably his performance in the last few laps definitely down to the fact that he had new tyres, and the tyre wear on the slicks really graining up fast I'm guessing due to the hot conditions and the nature of the track. But they really did not last at all. And in fact, the drivers were in pretty much every 10 to 12 laps, so it was definitely a race that was very much based on strategy. It was like a long game of chess. I think we saw after the second round of stops, Hamilton managed to get between Webber and Vettel. Webber obviously getting the jump of Vettel in the first round of pit stops when they all came in for slicks, because he had a lap extra on the intermediates, which turned out to be the right decision. So when he came in, he jumped Vettel, and then after the next round of stops, Hamilton managed to get in front. But that was until he was told to manage his fuel, which must have been gut-wrenching for him, because without that, he probably could have done very well today, and we probably could have seen him a lot higher up. But still, great to see Hamilton back in form again, back where he belongs, and he's really not lost anything. But we'll come to the Mercedes team later, obviously, as a very obvious talking point is going to come up, and I will address that very soon. But I will have to say one thing about Hamilton. Yeah, he pulled. Have you forgotten that you drive for Mercedes, man? It was quite funny to see him pull in the McLaren pit, and they're just like, no, no, go on, this is for Jensen. That was quite amusing to see. Obviously, he's new to the team, so he might still... It's an instinctive thing when you're coming in the pits, really, and he obviously looked out for the silver. Still, obviously, that went wrong, but he's still... What, confused about which team he was driving for, but never mind. He still managed to pull off a great race. But the one driver today I really feel for, Jenson Button. I mean, he's driving a car that this year the McLaren is just completely against them at the moment. Nothing really seems to be going right for them. And I don't know whether it's down to developments that they've made or just the fact that others have made such advances with their cars, but he was in a really good position today, and he was on a really good strategy as well. And I think he could have easily been P5, maybe even P4 or P3 with what the Mercedes team were having to contend with, but absolutely gut-wrenching stuff, and I couldn't feel worse for him, for his dramas in the pits, and he really didn't deserve that to happen to him. So, very unfortunate for Jenson. But now we come to the last 20 laps of the race, and this is where things get interesting. Both Red Bull and Mercedes had their cars 1, 2, and 3, and 4, because the order was Webber, Vettel, Hamilton, Rosberg. Rosberg and Hamilton were exchanging positions. Obviously, Hamilton by this point had to do some real heavy fuel saving. But the interesting thing is at Red Bull, and the obvious team orders there, which said for Vettel to hold position. Now, clearly he was having none of that, and he pulled that move off on on Webber, which, in my opinion, was a great and audacious move, and it's one of those that just leaves you gasping for breath. Webber fought back with great difficulty, but for a while he pulled it off. It was good, solid wheel-to-wheel racing, but eventually Vettel had the upper hand, and Webber was behind him in the end, and they got a 1-2. But also, Mercedes had the same thing, told Rosberg to hold position, which really infuriated him because he was much faster than Hamilton. And in my opinion, the way the Red Bull's tyres were going off near the end, I think Rosberg could have at least got a cheeky little second place in there. So, Mercedes, I think, really robbing us of a motor race there. And in my opinion, team orders are destroying the sport. I don't think they should be a part of it. I think every driver should be allowed to race, because it's not fucking racing if it's being controlled. I mean, if that's how they're going to be, they may as well do the whole race behind the safety car. I may be missing the point, but that's just my opinion for what it's worth. There shouldn't be team orders like that. I mean, I know people will say, oh, but Webber and Vettel collided in Turkey 2003. That was 3 years ago. We need to start getting past that. And, you know, today we saw that they can have a clean race. And Vettel clearly had the upper hand, and he took the win today for what was a well-deserved race. But, yeah, he did take matters into his own hand, though, and he is in trouble with his team. But, again, team orders. No. Get rid of them. So, but then it was Webber's statement on this podium which made things interesting. Vettel's in trouble, but he will be protected. Yeah. I don't think Webber's going to be a Red Bull driver for too much longer. I think he should get out this year, personally. I mean, I know that's probably going to leave him without a drive for next year, but I think that there'll be a team that will take him on, and he'll deserve it. I mean, he's just clearly been overshadowed by Vettel, and I think he's lost a little bit of confidence with it as well. I mean, just from how dejected he looked today, you know, and the little talk they had in the box before the podium as well. This clearly isn't a matter that we've heard the last of. Neither is the Rosberg-Hamilton thing. Rosberg clearly furious and arguing with the master of team orders, in my opinion, Ross Brawn. He was one that made the call in Austria 2002 to get Barrichello out of the way of Schumacher for the championship, in spite of the fact that Barrichello had led the entire race. But that's another matter altogether. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Malaysian Grand Prix, and now I'm going to go down a rundown of the results. So, here we go then. The winner today was obviously Sebastian Vettel, with Mark Webber coming second, Hamilton and Rosberg third and fourth, Massa fifth, despite strategy not working out. Still a good effort, still 10 points, and I'm pretty sure he'll be relatively pleased with that, even though he did start on the front row. But things just did not go right for him from there. Grosjean got sixth after falling back quite substantially at the start, although he did start 11th, but he still fell back a little bit more, but he was able to pull out a 6th place. Raikkonen 7th, despite his off-roading. Hulkenberg, again, very impressive today, 8th for Sauber, and obviously this was the first race he'd actually got to drive this year, so great for him. Perez got 9th, and I really think he needs to improve his defending and his racecraft if he wants to earn his seat at McLaren, because if he really wants to race at the sharp end, he's got to stop being so submissive to the front runners. They're just running rings around him and getting past him within 2 or 3 corners, and he's not really defending it. So he really needs to up his game there, because obviously passing is his forte rather than not letting people overtake him. But he still gets 2 points, and the last point goes to Jean-Eric Vergne, who always seems to be there or thereabouts picking up the last point, as is the way with the Toro Rosso drivers. So outside the points then, leading the rookies was Bottas, and Gutierrez got 12th. Bianchi 13th, again beating his teammate and both the Caterhams. I've got to say this to Bianchi, he is the most impressive of all the new rookies in my opinion, and he is definitely the one to watch, a future world champion without a shadow of a doubt. It's just how he's come in and straight away he's overshadowed his teammate. They're beating the Caterhams. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bianchi get a point this year, and how well deserved it would be too. So rounding up the field then was Peak, Van der Garde and Max Chilton. So there you have it. That was the Malaysian Grand Prix. If there's any point that you feel I've missed or haven't talked about, please feel free to drop your comment in the box below and I will reply to it straight away. But I will just bow out by saying, team orders, get rid of them. They are ruining the sport. We want to see racing, not a procession.